A freezing boy hugs his baby sister on the streets, until a millionaire stops his car and says, "I'm taking you with me." What happens next will restore your faith in humanity. The sky over Chicago was a dull gray canvas, choked with snow clouds that spat icy flakes like frozen tears from heaven. The bitter wind sliced through the city like 1,000 invisible knives. It screamed between the buildings, rattled street signs, and curled into alleys where no one wanted to be. On one of those forgotten sidewalks behind a dumpster and under the broken light of a flickering street lamp, Liam, just 10 years old, sat motionless, but not from peace. His thin body trembled, his shoulders stiff with cold, but his arms were locked tightly around a precious bundle in his lap, his baby sister, Maya. Her tiny cheeks were red and raw, her breath shallow and visible in short, puffy clouds. She whimpered now and then, but Liam rocked her gently, whispering, "It's okay, Maya. I got you. I got you." He had taken off his only sweater to wrap it around her. All that remained on him was a too-thin shirt, soaked at the sleeves with melting snow. His fingers were ice blue, his lips cracked and bleeding. Yet he never loosened his grip on the fragile life he was holding. The snow began falling faster, blanketing the city in white silence. A silence so deep, it felt like the world had forgotten them completely. Liam's mind flickered to his parents. How warm it used to be in the mornings when his mom made pancakes and sang silly songs. He could still hear his dad's voice calling, "Liam, don't forget your gloves." Now, there were no gloves, no pancakes, no songs, only silence and cold. 2 months ago, their car had spun out on black ice and hit a pole. His parents were gone before he even understood what had happened. He remembered the funeral, strangers in dark clothes whispering. Maya had cried and cried. No one had picked her up but him. A distant uncle took them for a few weeks. At first there was hope, but it didn't last. One night the man came home drunk and angry. He shouted, "I didn't ask for this, you're not mine." And then he threw them out, into the snow, into the dark, into nothing. Liam had knocked on a few doors, no one answered, or they pretended not to hear. He tried shelters, but they were full, or refused children without adults. He begged outside grocery stores, but was met with cold stares and quick footsteps. And now here they were, the last place he ever wanted to be, outside, in the cold, with his baby sister depending on him to be her world. She stirred in his arms and let out a weak cry. Her lips were turning purple. Liam's heart squeezed in panic. He rocked her harder, whispering, "Please, stay with me, Maya. Just hold on." Tears froze on his cheeks before they could fall. He looked up at the empty street, desperate for a sign of life, a car, a person, anything. Just then, he thought he saw headlights through the snow. Distant, slow-moving beams breaking through the fog like hope through despair. But he didn't move. He didn't dare believe. Hope had betrayed him too many times already. Still, the car kept coming, and Liam held Maya tighter, not knowing that fate, in the form of a stranger, was about to stop and change everything. The darkness had deepened into an unforgiving black. The streetlights flickered, casting long, ghostly shadows that danced over Liam's frozen form like silent watchers. Snowflakes swirled like whispers in the air, sticking to his eyelashes, gathering on Maya's blanket like a cruel joke. Beauty wrapped in suffering. Liam's arms were sore, but he refused to loosen them. He pressed his cheek to Maya's tiny head and began humming the lullaby their mother used to sing. His voice was dry and shaky, the melody broken by the cold in his throat. But he kept singing, because the sound, any sound, kept Maya awake. "Stay with me, baby girl," he whispered again and again, "just a little longer." The street stretched out in both directions, empty, lifeless. Not a soul passed, not a single door opened. Not even a dog barked. Just when Liam's hope began to flicker for the final time, a distant light appeared through the snowstorm. Headlights, slow, controlled, too clean and expensive-looking to be a regular cab or delivery van. Liam's breath caught in his throat. His heart started to pound. He adjusted Maya's blanket, cradling her tighter. She stirred slightly but didn't cry. She was too weak to cry now. The car, black, polished, and silent, pulled to the curb near them. The engine purred low like a panther crouched in the snow. Liam's first instinct was fear. Was it the police? A criminal? Someone dangerous? He ducked his head, shielding Maya, heart racing. He'd learned that the world didn't always mean well, especially when you were small, poor, and alone. Then, the window rolled down slowly. A man sat behind the wheel, dressed sharply in a deep navy suit, his features carved with quiet power. His skin was a rich cocoa brown, contrasting against the cold white falling outside. But what struck Liam most weren't the clothes or the car. It was his eyes. They were gentle, not pitying, not judging, just deeply concerned. "Are you okay?" the man asked, voice smooth and low like a cello string. Liam didn't respond. He stared back, silent, eyes guarded. He didn't know this man. He didn't trust him. He had been promised help before, and all it gave him was the sidewalk and the snow. But then Maya let out a soft, painful whimper. Her hand twitched, seeking warmth. The man's eyes widened slightly, and without waiting, he pushed open the car door and stepped out into the snow. "What are you doing out here in this weather? With a baby?" he asked again. This time, his voice lined with disbelief and urgency. Liam flinched as the man approached, but he didn't move. He couldn't. He was frozen not just from the cold, but from fear, from exhaustion, from not knowing what to believe anymore. "I'm not here to hurt you," the man said, crouching carefully so he was at Liam's level. "I'm Jonathan, and I can't just drive away and leave you two here." Liam's eyes darted around. He saw nothing but darkness and snow. No one else had stopped. No one else had even looked. Could he really trust this man? "I'm taking you with me," Jonathan said again, this time with such certainty that it made something shift inside Liam, a quiet crack in the wall he'd built around his heart. Jonathan shrugged off his long coat and wrapped it gently around Maya and Liam both. The warmth was instant and shocking. Liam stared up at him, lips trembling, not from cold this time, but from the unfamiliar ache of hope. For the first time in weeks, something inside him whispered, "Maybe this man is different. Maybe this is not the end, but the beginning." The drive away from the icy curb felt like a dream Liam couldn't trust. The warmth of the black car, the soft hum of the engine, the heated seats. It was all too strange, too sudden, too kind. Liam stayed silent, curled around Maya, never loosening his grip, even as the heater wrapped them in gentle heat. Jonathan Hayes sat in the driver's seat, eyes flicking between the road and the rearview mirror. He didn't ask many questions. He could see the trauma written in the boy's posture, the way his small frame curled protectively over the baby like a shield forged from heartbreak. But inside, Jonathan's heart ached. He had known hunger. He had known cold. He had known what it felt like to be overlooked. Not because you weren't worth saving, but because people had already decided your life didn't matter. He was not going to do that to these children. As the car approached his gated property just outside the city, the world changed. Towering pines lined the long driveway. Lights glowed softly from inside the sprawling home, not loud and rich, but warm and welcoming. The kind of place Liam hadn't seen since his parents were alive. The moment the car pulled up to the front door, Maria, the housekeeper, rushed out. "Mr. Hayes?" she gasped, seeing the fragile children in the back seat. "Oh my God! Is that a baby?" Jonathan opened the door and gently lifted Maya first. She stirred but didn't cry. Her tiny hands clung to his coat instinctively, like she knew she was safe, even if only for tonight. Liam hesitated, climbing out on shaky legs. His shoes were soaked. His fingers clutched the blanket Jonathan had given them like a lifeline. Maria didn't ask questions. She wrapped her arms around them both, guided them inside, and within minutes, the house transformed. Warm towels, a steaming bowl of chicken noodle soup, flannel pajamas, thick fuzzy socks, a roaring fire in the guest room hearth. But none of these luxuries, no marble floors or high ceilings, impressed Liam. He sat stiffly in the corner of the couch, eyes locked on Maya, who now lay sleeping peacefully in Jonathan's arms. "She hasn't slept like that since before," Liam whispered, voice raw. Jonathan looked down at the sleeping child in his lap, then back at Liam. "She's safe now. You both are." Liam didn't answer. He didn't know how to trust those words yet. Jonathan placed Maya in the guest bed, covering her with 2 soft blankets. Liam climbed in beside her slowly, afraid to disturb the peace that had finally settled on her tiny face. Before Jonathan left the room, he stood at the door and said softly, "I'll be right down the hall if you need anything." Liam nodded, barely. But deep inside, beneath layers of pain, betrayal, and loneliness, something flickered. It was the beginning of belief. Belief that maybe not all rich people looked the other way. That maybe not all strangers were dangerous. That maybe, just maybe, someone truly cared. Outside, the snow kept falling, but in that room, for the first time in weeks, the cold didn't win. And as the fire glowed warmly in the hearth, 2 children finally slept. Not just from exhaustion, but from the safety of being held by hope. The morning sun filtered through the tall windows, casting golden light across Jonathan Hayes's study, a room lined with books, photos, and memories of a life built from the ground up. But today, that room became a war room, because Jonathan wasn't just offering kindness, he was stepping into the storm. With Liam and Maya still asleep upstairs, wrapped in warmth and silence, Jonathan sat at his desk, phone pressed to his ear, voice low but firm. He called his legal team first, then a private investigator, then child services. He wanted the full picture. Not bits, not guesses, not assumptions. He wanted to know who failed these children. Hours passed. Phone calls weaving a story darker than he expected. He learned that Liam and Maya's parents had been killed instantly in a December car crash. A tragic, icy accident no one could have predicted. The children were taken into state care, placed with a distant relative. But within weeks, that man had signed them away with 3 cold words. "Not my responsibility." No one checked up on them. No one followed up when the forms were quietly filed. And before long, the siblings simply disappeared. Jonathan's jaw tightened. He stared at the report in front of him, official words typed in black and white, but nowhere did they mention Liam's tears or Maya's blue lips in the snow. No paper could capture the cruelty of indifference. He called child services directly. The social worker on the other end, polite but guarded, asked, "Mr. Hayes, why exactly are you getting involved in this case?" Jonathan didn't miss the pause in her voice. He knew the question behind the question. Why is a wealthy black man spending time, money, and heart on 2 white children abandoned by their own? He leaned forward, voice calm but cutting. "Because they're human," he said. "That's enough." The silence that followed was louder than any argument. But outside that conversation, the world had already begun to whisper. Some headlines praised him. CEO becomes unexpected guardian angel. Man saves children from freezing death. Others were colder, more cynical.
Why him?
PR stunt or sincere act? Online forums filled with opinions. Some called him a hero. Others questioned his motives. There were cruel voices, too. Hateful ones who couldn't see beyond skin. Trying to be a savior? Would he have helped them if they were black? Jonathan read every word. Then he closed his laptop and went upstairs. In the guest room, Liam sat beside Maya, brushing her baby hair softly while she babbled and tried to grab his nose. Liam looked up, his eyes tired, still uncertain, but full of love for the child in his arms. And in that moment, none of the noise mattered. Not the headlines, not the whispers, not the judgment. Jonathan crouched beside them and smiled gently. "Hungry?" Liam hesitated, then nodded. And just like that, another barrier between them fell. Not with loud promises, but with breakfast, with presence, with quiet action. Jonathan didn't save Liam and Maya to be seen. He saved them because someone had to, because dignity had no color, because pain didn't check race before it struck, and because being human should always be reason enough. The bitter cold of that December night slowly faded into memory, not forgotten, but softened by warmth, laughter, and healing. Weeks had passed since Liam and Maya arrived at Jonathan's home, and the change in them was nothing short of a quiet miracle. Gone was the pale, silent boy who barely spoke. Gone was the frightened child who slept in shoes, afraid someone might tell him to leave in the middle of the night. In his place stood a boy who now smiled when the sun rose. A boy who ate 3 meals a day without rushing, because for once he knew there'd be more tomorrow. A boy who had started to laugh again, not loud but genuine, like a hidden song returning. Jonathan had cleared his own schedule to be there for every moment. He didn't just offer them a place to sleep, he offered time, attention, and presence. He sat beside Liam at breakfast, teaching him how to crack eggs. He showed him how to use a computer, not just for games, but for dreams. Together, they created a digital drawing of Maya as a superhero. Liam called it Super Baby. He even helped Liam pick out a backpack and shoes for school. When Liam stepped onto that school bus for the first time, his eyes were wide, scared, but also proud. And Maya, she bloomed like springtime. She started to walk, her tiny feet tapping on wooden floors with wobbling joy. She giggled at everything. Dogs on TV, the clink of cereal bowls, the way Liam tickled her belly. One rainy afternoon, as Jonathan lifted her out of her crib, she wrapped her arms around his neck and whispered, "Papa." The word stunned him. It struck straight through the chest, not as a title, but a blessing, a trust. He sat down in the rocker and held her tighter, hiding the tears that rolled down his cheeks. He hadn't planned to become a father, but now it felt like this was what he had been meant for all along. In the following weeks, Jonathan filed the adoption papers. The process wasn't easy. Questions were asked. Court dates were set. But he never wavered. Not once. When the final court date came, Liam wore a button-up shirt, too big for him but neatly tucked in. Maya wore a yellow dress with little ducks on it. The judge looked over the paperwork, then down at the children, and finally at Jonathan. He said, "Mr. Hayes, are you certain?" Jonathan stood up slowly. His voice was steady but full of emotion. "They've already chosen me," he said. "I'm just making it official." And when the gavel came down with a soft thud, Liam burst into tears, but not out of sadness. Not fear, not pain. Relief. He ran into Jonathan's arms and buried his face into his chest. Jonathan knelt, arms around both children, whispering, "You're home now. Always." Later that evening, Jonathan hosted a small celebration at his home. Close friends, neighbors, even a few reporters arrived, curious about the man who had done something so unexpected, so unorthodox. A reporter leaned in during a quiet moment and asked, "Why did you do it?" Jonathan looked at Liam and Maya, who were playing on the floor, surrounded by toy blocks and laughter. Then he smiled and said with a calm but powerful voice, "They didn't choose to be homeless. They didn't choose their skin color. They didn't choose to lose their parents or be thrown away. But they deserve love, just like anyone else." And in that moment, more than the food, more than the applause, more than the headlines, it was clear. This was not just the end of pain. This was the start of a brand new story, a story called family. It began as a quiet act of kindness. One man, one freezing night, and 2 forgotten children. But kindness, when genuine, has a way of echoing far beyond the moment. Within days of the adoption, the story of Jonathan Hayes and the 2 siblings he saved spread like wildfire. Local news turned national. Blogs, talk shows, and podcasts picked it up. CEO rescues homeless children in snowstorm. A modern-day miracle in Chicago. Why this man's love crossed every line. People were stunned, moved, even shaken. In a world where headlines were often filled with division, violence, and fear, this story felt like sunlight after a storm. And as the story traveled, so did the questions. Deeper, heavier ones that demanded more than a passing thought. Why do we hesitate to help someone who doesn't look like us? Why are poor white kids assumed to be fine and poor black men assumed to be dangerous? Why are we so quick to judge and so slow to act? In barbershops and boardrooms? In churches, classrooms, and living rooms? People started talking. Jonathan didn't respond to every comment or question. He didn't sign a book deal. He didn't start a charity in his name. He just kept showing up. To parent-teacher meetings, to bedtime stories, to playground adventures, to late-night feedings. He raised Liam and Maya not with fanfare, but with faithfulness. Faithfulness to what was right, to what was human, to what was true. He taught Liam how to ride a bike. He held Maya's hand on the first day of school. He kissed every scraped knee, clapped at every school play, and stood proudly at every graduation. And as years turned pages, so did their story. Liam grew up into a quiet, compassionate man, a social worker who gave his life to helping abandoned children like he once was. He understood their silence, their fear, their walls, and more importantly, he knew how to break through them, with patience, with honesty, with love. Maya became a kindergarten teacher, bright, joyful, and full of light. Every child in her class felt like the most important person in the world, because to her, they were. Every now and then, someone would recognize their story and ask, "Was it really true? Were you really those kids in the snow?" They would smile. Liam would nod, and Maya would answer with the same line she'd memorized by heart. Love is the strongest thing in the world, and it doesn't care what color you are. And somewhere in the background of their lives, Jonathan, now older, his hair touched with gray, would stand watching. Still proud, still quiet, still their father. He hadn't meant to change the world, but by saving 2 lives, he reminded it of something too many had forgotten. That humanity doesn't come in shades, that compassion doesn't ask for proof, and that the smallest act of love can grow into something eternal. In the end, the lesson wasn't written on headlines or carved into plaques. It was written in hearts, in actions, in generations changed forever.